Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees Podcast. I'm John Dillon. I'm here with Steve Judgy Deaton.
Hi. Why do you always announce the male host before the female? Is that like a thing that
Thank
you
you.
just...
Wow.
You
Do I do that?
Yeah, I think so. I just wonder if it's like a little hidden thing that you
It's
just...
like ladies
Wow.
first is a myth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not... I mean,
Starting over. Welcome to the Two Trees Podcast. I'm John Dillon, and I'm here with...
How come I never get to introduce the podcast?
Well, go ahead and introduce it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rosemary Moeller, and this is the Two Trees Podcast. I'm here today with Steve Deaton.
Oh, hi.
Why'd you
Rose.
start with Steve?
Yeah.
We're friends, John.
Oh, I see. That's
Moving
fine.
on.
Yeah, well, I'm John. You guys suck. Okay, moving on. I need better friends.
None of this will
So
be edited out.
No, this is all staying in there. So
That's perfect.
if you have openings in your friend lists, I'm taking applications, so let me know.
He comes with the warnings.
Yes, and a warranty. I can be returned. All right, so we are talking, this is going to be our last episode, talking about the intertestamental period, and we're going to talk about Herod the Great. What made him the Great? You may want to know. I would like to know as well. So I spent a lot of time researching and reading for these episodes, and there's a lot of different opinions and thoughts, but I'm going to share with you what mine are, and you can sit at home and think to yourself, that man has no idea what he's talking about, and probably be more accurate than you realize.
Well, hey, I too have spent a lot of time thinking about Herod the Great and prepping for this episode. And by a lot of time, I mean Rose texted me the outline and I just opened it. So I'm ready to go. Let's
That's
go.
excellent. We're still on our retreat. We are enjoying the goodness of Hocking Hills, Ohio. And we're heading out to get lunch here in a little bit. And so I've been told not to take too long because people need to eat.
You know, I have a confession to make, and not to make this episode take longer than it needs, but I had been telling people that we were going to Amish County. Holmes County is just known in Ohio. And we are not at all in Amish County, so I was
Is
quite
this a
surprised.
public apology to
Well,
anybody you might have told that to?
I'd love going to Holmes County, and so this is a good second
I mean, there's
place.
probably some Amish around here.
Yeah, I'm here. So.
You're like XGB.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, Herod the Great, a lot of people in the ancient world, especially in the Greek world, liked this title, the Great, because of Alexander the Great. And pretty much what it meant is people considered you to be awesome. Not just your regular king, but someone who had done something that literally would change the world. On the Roman side of things, Pompey was the guy who was called the Great, Pompey Magnus. And Herod, even though he wasn't called Herod the Great in his lifetime, has been remembered throughout history as Herod the Great. Unless you've read your Gospels, and then you probably think of him as Herod the baby
Terrible.
killer, Herod
Yeah.
the terrible, or something along those lines. And in a lot of ways, he's a fascinating character, and in other ways, he's a disgusting, frustrating character. But what exactly made him the Great? Well, we've thought about it, and these are some of the things that I've come up with. The first reason that I think he's remembered as the Great is because he has immense wealth. He's one of the wealthiest people that's ever lived. He has the ability to bankroll just about anything that tickles his fancy. If he wants to build something, no problem. You want to take care of a problem with a wave of his checkbook or whatever the ancient equivalent thereof would be, he was able to just make that stuff
How
happen.
did he get to be so rich? Is this like family money?
Yeah, it is. Because
okay.
remember, he's not a Jewish person. He is an Idumean. And their families are very interesting people. They're descendants of Esau and living in the land that we would call today, or in the ancient world, they called it Edom. And it's Petra, right? It's the wilderness in between Saudi Arabia and Jordan and then into Israel. And if you think of it in the larger frame of the globe, that is the route to India. That's where the spices and things like that that were coming into the Roman Empire and the Greek world to be burned in temples or to be turned into perfumes. And so all of the exotic goods of the Far East are moving through King Herod's territory. And he taxed everything and made himself quite the nest egg. He didn't seem to really struggle with money at all. As a matter of fact, a couple times he buys everybody food, like the whole country. He goes down to Egypt during times of famine and comes back with enough food to feed the whole country. Or if he wants to, build a temple, he uses this money as a way of achieving personal glory. So all the spices that are burned in religious offerings throughout the Roman world are brought to them courtesy of King Herod, right? So Herod finds himself not just on the trade route, but he's on the very edge of the empire. He's getting away with a lot of shenanigans because of how far away he is from the center of power. And because people needed a strong ruler in this area, Herod is able to do pretty much anything he wants with Roman support. Does that make sense?
It sure does. I'm just trying to get my head around somebody that is the bad guy in our stories from the Gospels, being somebody who actually had the ability and the resources to do great things.
Oh, yeah, and he does great things.
Great in a good way. Like he could have used his wealth and his power for good, and instead he is incredibly corrupt, even as he's, kicking around doing great things.
Well, I think buying food for a country is a good thing.
Yeah, he's not a monster in the sense that, a serial killer type, criminal. Oh, okay, he's a serial killer, but he's a
terrible
nice
person.
serial killer.
The end.
But don't we find that a lot in, just even recent historical figures that are remembered for their war crimes or the really horrible things they've done? They've also done really great things. I mean, I think even in our the history of the U.S. where we find ourselves in America, a lot of the I can't remember the name they call the early capitalists, like the Rockefellers and all those people that were
captains of industry.
That's what I was looking for. And I think of the Rockefeller in specific because a lot of the public libraries that we have come from the Rockefeller Foundation, and yet he did a lot of not great things in his time
and so
too.
Herod isn't always a grouchy old man, right? He starts out with he's a military guy. He has a tremendous record of being a dashing cavalry officer who has fought the enemies of the Roman Empire. He retakes the city of Jerusalem, and the Romans look at him as their answer to the problems in the East. Remember, the Parthian Empire is right there. So Herod sits on the dividing line between the powers of the East and the powers of the West. And so he's able to do some pretty tremendous things, but he's using not the Bible and the Word of God to judge greatness. He's using the Hellenistic world around him. And so the Romans looked at Herod and they thought, this is a great man.
This reminds me of Martin and his God's measuring stick, man's measuring stick. He was measuring up on man's measuring stick all the way.
Yeah, the motive really defines the act. And so, if the goal is bring peace to this section of the world, Herod is a great man. If the goal is make a lot of money, Herod is a great man. If the goal is get your name out there in the world, Herod is a great man. If it's to be a good father, Herod is terrible. If it's to love your people, Herod is terrible. If it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, Herod is terrible. He's not a trustworthy person. He's a very paranoid, power-hungry. He's a supervillain. That's pretty much what he is. He isn't just famous, though, because he has great wealth. He's also the great because he is connected to some of the most powerful names in human history. Right? The Idumeans themselves are a military power. These clans of desert warriors who were out in the wilderness, they're impressive. They're very strong family, clan-oriented tribes of people or clans. And Herod's family has the unique support of both the Idumeans and close ties with the Jewish and Roman families. Remember, he married into the Maccabees, and so he has the connections to the Maccabees. He has the support of Julius Caesar. He has the support of the local Sanhedrin and Sadducees and different groups of people. But he saw himself as a client of one particular Roman, and his name is Julius Caesar. And so Herod the Great is able to do some pretty amazing things because he's friends with all the right people. And his name pops up in Roman history all the time. So going all the way back to his father, Antipater, who rescues Caesar from a siege in Alexandria, Herod's family has been connected to the Romans and to Julius Caesar in particular. And so Herod never wavers in his support for the Romans. He's not sometimes friends with the Parthians and sometimes doing things on his own. Herod, even though he is the king of the Jewish people, doesn't see himself as an independent power. He is a total team player, and that team is Rome. And so when he starts his kingdom, he does so in the city of Rome. He goes to the city of Rome and he asks for troops and support. And the entire Senate holds religious services to the Roman gods to bless Herod, to launch his kingdom into the east.
Okay, so pause. What was Rome getting out of this deal?
They were getting a powerful, stable leader in a troubled region, and someone who had the military muscle to look threatening to the Parthians, and somebody who you didn't question whose side he was on. If the Romans sent a message and it said, hey, do this, Herod would get it done.
How high?
Yep. He is definitely
he's
a
also
supporter.
an insider too, right? So that he has the ability to probably stabilize the region for Rome in ways that an outsider couldn't.
Yeah, he's been to Rome, right? He has friends there. Mark Antony, Caesar, like these are people that he personally
But even
knew.
in Jerusalem, he's an insider kind of there too.
Yeah, he's married into the Maccabees. He knows the Sadducees in a way that John Hyrcanus, the wishy-washy king earlier, never was. Herod is fully capable. And it's his capability that kind of makes him dangerous. It's the fact that he has the ability to be incredibly intelligent that makes him scary in the things that he does. He's not the kind of person who is just kind of doulas and you're not really sure what he's doing. Herod is manipulative, sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way.
He's got his own motivations to be here too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So his coronation happens in Rome. He's blessed by the pagan temples. And actually the documents for his kingdom are kept in a Roman temple to the gods. And so it was seen as the pagan gods are his patrons, even though he himself is not a practicing pagan. He was kosher. He was a follower of Judaism as much as he felt like it. But his culture was Jewish, even though he himself is not Jewish. But he definitely is a Hellenist. He believes that Hellenism, as seen in Rome, is the path to power and greatness. And he follows it so well that the entire Greek and Roman world looks at this guy and says, that's what we were trying to do all along. And so Herod is great because of the things he does. He's friends with Caesar. He's friends with Cleopatra. He's friends with Julius Caesar. He's friends with even the guys who murder Julius Caesar later on. He's friends with everybody. And because he sees himself
Sounds like Jacob.
It does. Jacob is friends with everybody.
Jacob's a blessing.
Suspicious.
He's never met a stranger.
Yeah, very suspicious.
I, on the other hand, am grouchy
Yeah, me
and
too.
terrifying.
Yeah, I have no friends.
I'm
Glad-
not weighing in on this conversation.
Are you our friend?
I am your friend.
Oh, I have one. Hooray. So when Caesar is murdered, this causes a major problem for Herod because Herod viewed Julius Caesar as his patron. And so he's not really sure what to do. He is a loyal Roman king, except for now the Romans are at war with each other, and he's not really sure what to do. And so Herod kind of walks this fine line during the war between Octavian and Mark Antony. And he supports Mark Antony because he knows him, because Mark Antony was seen as the heir apparent to Julius Caesar. And so when the Civil War erupted, Herod was in a very uncomfortable position, right? He's friends with everybody. And so he supports Mark Antony with money and with troops, but he doesn't get too deeply involved in the war itself. Like he's not out on the front lines fighting battles. And that actually turns out really well for him because Mark Antony is clobbered. He and Cleopatra, their Eastern hopes for empire are dashed as Octavian destroys the Civil War, and suddenly Herod has a problem. He supported the wrong side in this Civil War. And so he wasn't sure that he was going to survive this. He was kind of worried that he might be replaced. And so he takes a huge amount of gold and goes to visit Octavian. And he says, listen, I was a friend to Caesar, and I was a friend to Mark Antony and Cleopatra. It's true. Don't judge me based on whose friend I was. Judge me based on what kind of friend I was. And Octavian listens to that and he says, you know what? That's true. You were very loyal. If you would be my friend and give that loyalty to me,
And all that gold.
Yeah, and if you have any more baskets of gold, I would appreciate that. And so that's what Herod does. He says, absolutely, I'm your man. I picked the wrong side, but I'm yours now. Here is a I'm sorry gift of several truckloads of gold. And he buys his way in. And so he presents himself as a stable power in the East and is willing to be Octavian's new guy. And so that makes him great. He's able to survive one of the most deadly periods of Roman history ever. He's also a political mastermind. He's smart. He's a political strategist, and he learned from the mistakes of his youth. He's not the kind of guy who gets stuck in a pattern that doesn't work. If it didn't go well, he wants to fix it. And so he's very creative in the way he goes about things. Even though he's not Jewish, he is ruling the Jewish people well, and they, for the most part, support him. Even though he's not of the kingly line, the Maccabees, everyone seems okay with this. You don't become that guy unless you are really clever and subtle at what you do. One of his favorite things to do was to keep his potential allies at odds with each other. He was constantly stirring the pot between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, one house against another house, one family against another family. Chaos surrounds Herod, and he looks like the only stable personality in the whole area. And he's able to do that over and over and over again. He is a master of divide and conquer.
It seems like he's not just a master of divide and conquer, but it would take some serious skill to put yourself in the kind of position on top where you could foment, stirring the pot beneath you and not have some kind of a revolution because of who you know and your connections. You're sort of untouchable.
Yeah, people were scared of Herod. He had a tendency, for instance, when he becomes king, he murders all of the top dogs of the political elite. And he makes a whole new aristocracy, people who are called the Herodians. And they come up in the Gospels. These are people who owe their power to Herod's family. And so he has completely, masterfully remade the political world of the Jewish people. And the Romans are looking at him and they're thinking, man, this guy, he kind of did the impossible. No one had been able to do this in a way that Herod was. But that megalomania, that desire for control, that constant pitting your enemies against each other is going to cause him problems because as he gets older, he views everyone who has power as a potential threat to himself.
Even a baby.
Even his children, potential anythings. And so what ends up happening is anyone who is doing a really good job kind of gets tossed out. He doesn't allow people to thrive in his kingdom in a way that he's not a gardener. He's more of an executioner. And he looks great at the expense of everybody else. And so even though he is powerful, he can't let go of power. He clings to it. Even his children weren't safe. Anyone showing initiative was a threat, and he was going to take care of it. No one was able to shake him from power until he died. He understood how to play the game to the extent that he made it impossible even for his children to follow in his footsteps. And so is he great? It depends on what you mean. Is he a great father? No. Is he a loving, caring, merciful, just person? No. But he did some impressive things.
So, but you do have to admit that Herod the Memorable doesn't have the same ring as Herod the Great.
Herod, I did stuff you didn't.
I did a bunch of stuff.
People like me. Well, some people did. He's going to get in problems later, and as he gets older, he goes a little bit nuts. Okay, that seems to have been the cool thing to do if you were a king, was to have a little bit of madness, especially later in life, just to keep life spicy. And so the Maccabees did this, and so did Herod. But one of the things that Herod masterfully does is he understands how to use the weapon that is Hellenism. He understands that worldview as something to be seen, not something to just be believed. So he builds beautiful buildings, not because he's interested in making things look nice, but because he knows if he builds something amazing looking, people will look at that and say, Herod built that. Mm-hmm. If he does something over the top generous, people will look at that and say, Herod did that. And so he's building temples, he's building roads, he's building marketplaces, anything that he can do, which on the surface may look altruistic, may look like he's just being a nice guy, is in reality he's padding his resume. I am great because I have done these things.
Very calculating.
Oh, yeah. One of the things, for instance, that he does is he wants to build a palace, right? He's the king. He needs a good palace. But he knows the power is in Jerusalem. And so he doesn't want the palace to be very far from Jerusalem. And he wants it to be visible from the southern ridgeline of Jerusalem. And the problem was there wasn't a hill tall enough for him to build on that you could see the palace from. And so he moved a mountain on top of another mountain to build his palace so everyone could see it. He literally had enough faith to move a mountain so that his palace could be seen. Even if he wasn't in the city, people saw that's where our king lives.
Yeah.
High up, we call it the Herodium today. It's a really cool, it looks like a volcano. And it's beautiful, or was especially at the time. But I mean, it's impressive what he does. And so let's go to the Gospel of Matthew 17, verses 14 through 20.
And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and he suffers terribly, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? He said to them, Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you.
So here we have an instant. First of all, I want to point out, did you notice that Jesus rebuked the demon?
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to our episode about the rise of Herod, you probably remember us talking about how Jesus rebukes the seas, rebukes chaos, and that same word is used here to talk about the spiritual enemies of mankind. And so Jesus is performing spiritual warfare. And then he has this very interesting quote where he's talking about faith and the doing of great things. And so he's going to talk about not just doing impressive things, but things that are genuinely great. And he says, if you have enough faith, you can move mountains.
You think he's referring to Herod?
In the world of Jesus, when they talked about moving mountains, people thought of Herod.
Interesting.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
And he had the vision, and he got it done. That's the idea here of a drive, a success. I'm at war with the darkness.
Okay, so time out a little bit. Do you think that Jesus then is... So this is... I'm just putting some things together.
Excellent.
I always read this to say that, well, if I had enough faith, I could, like, abracadabra. It's what it reads like to me. You know, mountain be moved, and the mountain is moved. But do you think this is referring more to the tenacious drive that when you're committed to something and you put your mind to it, it can happen?
Yeah, I think it's both. Like Jesus is able to say to the wine, hey, water, stop being water and please be wine. And it becomes wine.
Right.
And so, there's a sense in which the miraculous is a way that God can move.
Yeah.
But with Herod, it was just through tenacity and vision and using of his hands.
Yeah.
And God can use that as well.
Okay, I just have never thought about that side of that being so. Okay, I'm just putting. That's really cool.
Yeah, what you don't have here is a recipe.
Right.
Add this and you get this. And he says, if you have, and in the faith he describes in terms of a tree, of a seed, it will grow into this thing. And so Herod uses his power, which is impressive, to move a mountain. Jesus, though, is talking about things in a supernatural way. And he's saying, listen, if you have faith, just like a mustard seed changes. Life is in it, and it becomes something else. It moves the earth as it puts down roots, and it begins to bring seeds of another kind into the world. And so there's this very rich sense in which the teachings of Jesus are working on multiple levels. It isn't just supernatural.
Right.
It has a very real, hey, look over there. Remember that mountain used to be over there, and now it's over there?
Yeah.
Because we carried it. Why did we carry it? Because Herod demanded it. What if the King of Kings demanded something? There's, again, this idea of being a tree. So the people were talking about what Herod had done. He had literally moved a mountain, and it became a monument for the glory of Herod. The casting out of the demon isn't to glorify the exorcist, but to glorify the king, the driving out of the enemy. Herod accomplished a great act. Sure, it was one that highlighted his personal wealth, his power, his ingenuity. Jesus is calling his disciples not to the pursuit of personal power and comfort, but to wage war against the darkness. He's saying, listen, Herod may have moved dirt. We need to move the demonic. We need to make this space safe. We need to push against the darkness. And the point isn't, look how great my faith is, but to say, look at what God has done. And so that's Herod. He's a military kind of guy. He's a builder of things. He understands that building great things will also bring him power. And he builds some of the most impressive buildings of the ancient world. And he didn't only build them in Israel. He built them all around the Mediterranean. And he would say, oh, you're building a temple to Dionysus? Let me fund it. Let me give you the money that's needed to get what there appears to be a great and mighty wind.
It doesn't look that great and mighty unless it's going over. It's just a little breeze.
If anyone has tongues of fire over their head, we will know that this is going down. And so he understands that there's power in architecture. He's sponsoring things all over the Roman world, not just for the Jewish community, but for the pagan community as well. And he understands also that if he is going to rule in Israel, the number one thing that he needs to have his name on is the temple. He needs to be seen as the patron of the Temple Mount. And so he extends the Temple Mount to the north, to the south, and the west. The original Temple Mount was about 17 acres. He is going to move mountains and extend the size of the Temple Mount. When Herod is done, it moves from 17 acres to 36 acres.
Wow.
So it's not just a little bit bigger, it's massively bigger. And so that swallows, a lot of archaeologists are real grouchy with Herod for having done this because it means that there's a lot of cool stuff under the ground because Herod moved all this dirt and he built the walls of the temple that Jesus is going to see and that you're going to see if you go to Jerusalem and you see, the Wailing Wall or those kinds of things. Those
and when we talk
Herodian.
about Herod's temple, this is Herod the Great.
Herod the Great. That's him, yeah. And so the bones of the Temple Mount are still in there, right? That David would have seen, Solomon, that kind of a thing. But when Herod is done with it, it's double the size. The courtyard is huge. There are these massive colonnades. This is one of the coolest things that Herod done. The Western Wall is still there today. He puts double colonnaded porticos, beautiful, massive stonework. There's these arches, these 4 rows of pillars that are there. And everyone who looks at this thing thinks, this is absolutely stunning. It's gorgeous. And he does it in a way that the Pharisees are happy with, that the Sadducees are happy with. It was the most beautiful building in the world. The grounds were extended partially to allow Gentiles to come onto the Temple Mount and look at the temple. He's kind of dipping into the tourism angle of this. There were little walls. Gentiles can come this far. Women can come this far. And you could see this. And he was bringing people to Jerusalem to move it from a provincial capital to one of the most beautiful cities in the ancient world. So the grounds are extended. The gates are 25 feet wide and 50 feet tall.
Oh, my goodness.
That's 5 stories high, the doors. Okay, so when Jesus goes into the temple, it's not the little one that Zerubbabel built.
Yeah.
That's the bones of it.
It's like a destination place.
Absolutely. Josephus is going to say, more or less, if you've never seen the temple, you have no idea what a beautiful building looks like. It was white limestone. It was gorgeous. It shone in the sun. It was an amazing thing to see. And Herod wanted people to look at that and think, Herod built that. He can't go into it all the way because he's not a Jew. But if he builds it, it becomes his. And so he has figured out a way to be excluded and still rule the whole thing. It's a boss move.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Herod not only builds this temple to curry favor with the Jewish faithful, but he also wants his Roman bosses to be proud of him and to know Herod is on their side. And so he goes to one of the great gates of the temple, one of those 5-story tall gates, and above the gate he hangs a gigantic golden eagle in the archway. And so everyone going into the temple, looking up, sees this golden eagle. That was an unmistakable nod to Roman power.
Sure.
Remember, the Romans have eagles on their battle standards.
Yeah.
The Pharisees hated it. Every time they went into the temple, there was this pagan eagle. And every time they walked through, they grumbled. I hate that thing. Just look at it. And it became a very hot-button issue. It was a reminder of the Gentiles' power over them. The Sadducees kind of liked it. They thought, hey, that's nice. It's gold. It makes the Temple Mount is now way fancier than it used to be. We are looking good. And so because the Pharisees hated it, the Sadducees supported it. That's the kind of thing
Reasonable.
that Herod did.
Mature.
A lot of the Pharisees.
That's the petty that I can get behind. You know what I mean?
They looked at this and they thought, man, we're breaking Moses' law. This is a graven image on the Temple Mount. And so 2 rabbis, one named Matthias and one named Judas, are preaching about how bad this particular idol is. We took a small break there because the wind got rough.
Yes, it did.
But it's better now.
Yes, it is.
We've rebuked the winds.
Yes, we have.
We didn't. But
We
they
just
stopped
waited
on the
them
road.
out.
Yeah, that's true. It's trying to make us sound like
Spiritual.
we had faith as great as a mustard seed. But there's an eagle, a golden eagle, and there are 2 Pharisees who hate it so much. Their names are Matthias and Judas, right? Shocking names for anyone who's been following this. And when Herod is old, he gets sick, and people begin to think, you know what? I bet he's going to die. This is our opportunity to get rid of this eagle. And so the rabbis stir up a crowd, and some of the disciples of these rabbis get ropes and climb up to where the eagle is, about 5 stories, right? They've climbed way up there, and they knock it down. They set the ropes, the stuff, they rip it off the wall. It falls down to the ground, and everyone starts chopping it up with axes. At first, it starts out like a religious thing, and then everyone realizes there's chunks of gold laying all over the floor.
Right. You're not going to let that go to waste.
And so people who weren't necessarily interested in the religious aspect of it got very interested in the destruction of the eagle pretty quickly. Well, the problem was that Herod wasn't as sick as he seemed to be.
The old trickaroo, huh?
Yeah, and so what happened was he suddenly is better in the morning, and he says, hey, what happened to my eagle? Who was involved in destroying the eagle? Because you have upset the Romans and you have upset me. And so he arrests the disciples and these rabbis, and he burns them alive.
Wow.
I mean, he's a nasty guy.
It feels like a rookie move on their part. They should have waited for him to be dead before they did such a destructive act to
they were
something that
very
was so
hopeful.
important to him. Wow.
Yeah. So Herod is that kind of a guy. He's not nice. He's the kind of guy who's going to pretend to be dying to see who his real friends are. He has a complex political relationship as well. He's going to have a lot of wives. Herod's marriages mostly seem to have been based on lust and politics. His court was swirling with different alliances and priorities. He had 10 wives and 14 surviving children.
Wow.
And so trying to keep up with the court drama is nigh on impossible. I tried really hard to make sense of it, to present it in this episode, and pretty much the summary is
Soap opera?
nobody liked anybody else and they all wanted to kill everyone.
Yeah. Reasonable.
It seems to have been the gist of what it was like growing up.
What a terrible legacy.
Yeah, and so your brothers were your enemy. Your in-laws,
Yeah,
all of this is deceit.
I can relate a little bit.
Your in-laws are nice.
You cannot relate on a Herod the Great level. Don't
I've
be
met
that
your
person.
people. They are not Herod the Great.
I'm kid. I kid.
I don't think so. He's a judgy person. He announced
Oh my
it.
goodness.
Yeah, so
I think I'm not going to live that one down.
no, probably not.
You
We're going to
probably
put it on
should
a
not have
t-shirt.
announced it
That's
on a
okay.
ramble.
I own it.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard the ramble, they did a ramble just a little bit ago, and Deaton was like, I am a judgy person. And I think it would make a great T-shirt.
It's all true.
Yeah.
I would wear the shirt too.
Now, of all of the wives that Herod has, mostly they're because he was, romantically attracted to somebody. But he does have a couple marriages that are political. And the most important marriage that he has is to the Maccabee families. Herod is not Jewish. He's Idumean. He's a loyal follower of Judaism, but his family rose to power as servants of the Hasmoneans, and now because of the support of the Romans, he's in charge. So he needs to class up his resume. He marries a Hasmonean princess named Miriamne. In the short term, that's a great idea. Everyone is now going to view your children as descendants of the Maccabees. And so Herod, originally that was the intent. Instead of being seen as a Gentile pretender, his wife and her children are going to give his family the prestige that he's missing. The problem is that people really liked his children and his wife, and he got jealous. He began to see that the love and the support that people were giving to them should have come to him. And so he views his family as a threat, right? So Miriamne, whose family is the traditional kings of Israel at this time, the high priests and the kings have been the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, for quite a while. Miriamne goes to Herod and she says, listen, sweetie, I would love it if you would make my brother the high priest. He's a good-looking guy. He's smart. He's intelligent. You're the king. You're the one who makes these decisions. Make him the high priest. And Herod says, no, I don't want any Maccabees in power anywhere, ever. And she's so, trying to think, naggy about it that, I mean, obviously that's a her thing, not anyone else's ever naggy. But yeah, she nags him until he decides, you know what, fine, I will make your brother the high priest. But in the back of his mind, he's thinking it's a short step from high priest to king. And so what happens is Herod, try to think of this nicely, Herod has the high priest, this guy's name is John, he's invited out to a pool party, and they drown him in the pool. And then Herod says, oh, what a terrible accident that the exact same thing that I wanted to happen happened. And he has eliminated another Maccabee. He has secured another candidate for the high priesthood. But at this point, Miriamne begins to hate Herod. It's one thing if bad things are happening to other people, but Herod has just killed her brother, who she loved very much. And so there's a lot of political family. In the end, Mariamne and both of her sons are killed
By Herod.
by Herod. It's dangerous to be a child of Herod. Later on, Octavius, the emperor of the Roman Empire, is going to say at a dinner party that it is better to be a pig than Herod's son. Better to be Herod's pig than Herod's son.
That's a legacy.
Yeah, the idea was, he doesn't eat pigs,
Yeah.
but he has no problem killing his children.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of guy that King Herod is. He's killed off a lot of his family members, including his sons, including Mariamne. And he doesn't just kill those ones. He's a really nasty fellow. Let's jump then into the gospel story. Let's go to Matthew chapter 2, verses 16 through 18.
Then Herod said, when he saw...
There we go. You got to read it.
Oh, okay, hang on, sorry. Let me start over. Then Herod, when he saw he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more.
Now, a lot of people really question the Gospels because this story is present. There is no secular evidence that says King Herod killed the babies of Bethlehem. And there are several reasons why I don't find this worrying at all. The first one may be that there are not many sources of King Herod's life. And many of the things that he does are no doubt not recorded, especially as people who are going to be friends of Herod are writing these accounts. They try to sweeten up some of the evil things that he does. So we don't have sources that talk about it. I don't think that's worrying. The sources we do have about the life of Herod, they focus on major deaths that have political impact. They don't care if random citizens in Bethlehem are killed. They care if princes or Sadducees or Pharisees or the power structure of Jerusalem are impacted. So when they're writing, guys like Josephus, they're focused in on the religious squabbling, the power. They're not interested in the everyday story of regular people. Jesus is. He is very much preaching to the outcast, to the outsider. And so this is not a problem. Also, Bethlehem isn't very big. It's a city of maybe 300 people. So how many?
So not a lot of children probably.
Yeah, you're not
were
talking
involved.
about hundreds of children. How many of these kids are under 2 years old in a city of 300? I mean, maybe 10 tops, 6 or 7.
That's
and
interesting.
so it's a horrible thing.
Always in my mind, I just assumed it was like 1,500 babies.
Yeah, well, it's evil. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
like,
not
I'm not
trying
trying to say it wasn't as evil.
Right.
It's evil, but why isn't it recorded?
Right.
When you're around someone who's killing his own children, this kind of is just Herod on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
He's just upset. And so this isn't surprising to me that it's not mentioned in the other places. And I don't consider it to be a reliable reason to question the authenticity of the Gospels. It's just the reality of living in a small town around someone as evil and as big as Herod was. So Matthew tells us this happened. And to me, that's gospel. It happened. Now, why does he then say that this is a fulfilled prophecy? And he uses some weird words. And if it's weird, it's probably important. Don't push past place names or important things
what is
like that.
Ramah?
Where is Ramah? Right? They make the noodles there, Ramah noodles.
Sure, yeah.
No. Yeah. The word comes from the Hebrew word which means a high place, right?
Okay.
It's used several times to designate a city that's up on a hill. But there is one city in particular called Ramah that has special significance to the Old Testament story. You're going to see it in the book of 1 Samuel. So let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 19 through 20.
They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah.
Where?
At Ramah.
Okay, go ahead.
And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord.
So where is Samuel's hometown?
Ramah.
It's Ramah.
Mm-hmm.
This is a place that is the home of the prophet Samuel. Samuel is the kingmaker. He is the one who brought the monarchy into being. It is a place connected with prophets. And not just with prophets, but Samuel is also a priest. He's serving in the tabernacle. And so Ramah is a place name that the ancient Israelites would have been very familiar with. It backloads the story of Samuel and David and Saul and the prophecy of Hannah into this story. Most people don't make this connection into then.
Most people being me.
Well, most people being me too. I had to go look it up. Where is Ramah? Let's look at another one. This is...
Can I ask a question real quick?
Of course.
Okay.
It's not like the outline is calling us or anything.
Okay. Or I can just keep it in forever.
Fine. Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Isn't there another situation where some people are killed that's in the Saul and the Samuel story, Rizpah, where her sons are killed with the Gibeonite thing, where they, and I always wondered if maybe this was also talking about that at the same time, because so many of them
the stories are very similar.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and she like shoos the birds away until harvest because I guess of her great love for her sons or something.
Yeah, there's some really cool Old Testament-y connections here.
Yeah.
Let's look at 1 Samuel 1:19 through 20.
Go ahead, Steve. I lost my place.
No,
here.
I'm sorry. We just did that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah,
I think,
1 Samuel 8:4 through 5.
Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways.
What a great introduction. Behold, you are old.
Yeah.
That would also make a great coffee cup.
That sounds like something I would
42 is old.
Go ahead.
Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations.
So where did this happen at? Where did they demand
This
for
was Ramah.
It's Ramah.
Yeah.
The city that is connected to the birth of monarchy in Israel is Ramah.
Interesting.
And so you may be familiar with the messianic profile, right? When the Messiah comes, he's going to be prophet, priest, and king. Ramah is the city that is connected to the prophets, to the priests, and to the king. Ramah is the place where Samuel meets Saul. It's also the place where Israel rejects God and demands a king. It's interesting to me that God would tie its history into the story of Messiah.
Do we know where this is? Like
vaguely, yeah.
archaeologically? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything to say.
Someone grumbled.
Might have been the wind.
Okay.
Definitely the wind.
Let's jump to Jeremiah, because there's another element where Ramah becomes an important part of Israel's history. Jeremiah 40, verse 1.
The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord after Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard. I have no idea how to pronounce that.
That was good.
The captain of the guard had let him go from Ramah when he took him bound in chains along with all the captives of Jerusalem and Judah who were being exiled to Babylon.
So when the exile happens, when the Babylonians come and they capture the people and they send them into exile, the place that they gathered the exiles is Ramah. If you wanted to pick a place that is connected to a prophet, a priest, a king, and the exile, the end of the kingdom, it's Ramah. It serves as bookends for this. And so Jeremiah here is being sent into exile, and the place that this happens is Ramah. This ancient prophecy, right, is a complex network of history and symbols and mystery. It's not a map, it's poetry, unveiling hidden revelation. And so you could say, if there was a new king being made, you could call that place Ramah, even if that wasn't the name of it. Even if it was a place that reminded you of the story of Ramah, you could use that word and it would backload the story into the modern events. And so the prophet is not saying that the Messiah is going to be born in Ramah. He makes it pretty clear that that's going to happen in Bethlehem, but that the stories of these places are linked. Rachel is weeping for her children. You can imagine the personified Rachel weeping as Israel is sent into captivity. This is the prophecy. This is the way that it's used here in the scripture. And so the world around Bethlehem didn't care enough to write down the tragedy that was the death of the children at Bethlehem. But Rachel is weeping. There's this idea of recognizing that the present tragedy is connected back into the past and the history of Israel, and also projected forward into the coming of a king who is going to deliver us from the hands of violence like Herod and like the Romans are bringing. So just because they didn't care enough to try to stop Herod doesn't mean that God doesn't care. He was born, and he is going to put an end to this. The Lord did not forget what happened, but he brought justice and he brought hope. Pretty much what I'm trying to tell you is that Jesus is the Lord of Lords, the God of gods, mighty and awesome.